r/AskReddit. Teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? At an adult learning college, the student was getting paid by their employer to come to college and get their formal qualification. Their employer was upset that after 12 months, this guy hadn't passed any of their subjects. They complained to the college that there seemed to be a mistake. The first I knew of it was admin staff asking why he had failed so many classes. I didn't know who he was as he hadn't ever turned up or submitted any work over the 12 months. That's the first time I've been asked to show evidence of non-attendance. Apparently that's a thing. Start taking dated pictures of an empty chair and just keep them in a folder. I used to teach a PE class to 3 to 5 year olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinda. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming fuck and cunt at the top of his lungs while trying to punch, kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head, and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone he would scream with laughter wearing the biggest shit-eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy fuck, I will never forget that kid. Was teaching 7th grade in what we call in Germany gymnasium, something like high school, and it was the second week of the year. I noticed some kind of stress in him, and then at one point he erupted. Threw his pencil case against the blackboard, yelled, "Everything is shit. Everything." Stood up, climbed on the desk, pulled out his penis, and peed while crying. The whole class including me was just shocked. I would have liked to prevent this situation, but it just escalated so quickly, and when it was happening it was so surreal I was paralyzed. After what felt like 100 years I just grabbed him, threw him over my shoulder, and walked out of the classroom. Held him by his hand while shouting into the classroom that they should stay in the classroom while I'm away and only leave it for the next class. I went to call his parents. He got picked up and never came back to this school. I don't know what happened to him. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching another kid, his friend, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he had never been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after. Had no idea what he did was weird or upsetting. I have two that stand out. 1. A student made a hit list and had numerous teachers and students on it. 2. I found a letter on the ground that an 8th grader had written that talked about being sexually abused by her uncle. I gave it to my principal and had to meet with the police to talk to them about the student and finding the letter. Edit. Wow. This is getting a lot more votes than I thought it would. Well, anyway, on a side note, before I got into teaching I was a youth fitness instructor and summer camp director at a non-profit, and I will add this story too. I worked with an 8th grader who clearly had some behavior problems. He would not follow any directions and did not work well with other kids. I was going to remove him from the program, but his aunt worked at the same place, so I gave him a second and third chance. When his behavior didn't change I was forced to remove him. Years later I found out, randomly reading the news one day, that he and 2 other kids, by this time he was 19, had murdered another kid in town. I'm getting a lot of comments ranging from "you did the right thing" to "my school had a kid who had a hit list too. He was a good kid who never hurt anyone." Point being, as an educator that is entrusted with the well-being and safety of 24 children at a time, my absolute #1 priority is to always provide a safe environment and follow all procedures related to threats or violence. No exceptions. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I was doing group time, singing songs, reading a book, and all the kids were sitting on the floor. One left to blow her nose. She came back, walked through the crowd of kids to get back to her spot, grabbed a quiet girl's hair, and kept walking. My assistant thought it was a mistake, but the girl kept walking. She even bent at the knees and yanked while the poor long-haired girl screamed. That girl had no remorse and would be so unpredictable. She would look in your eyes, but right through them. It was a stressful year. At the first school that I taught at, I had a girl come up to me one day and say, "Robert has a knife." I pulled Robert into the hallway to talk with him about it. He said that he didn't have a knife, but did have a box cutter. I asked him why he had it and he said, "Because I'm tired of Chris." Chris was an annoying suck-up, but wasn't really bad or mean to other kids. I asked Robert what he was planning on doing to Chris. He said, "I'm going to get him in the bathroom." I usually took the class to the restroom after lunch, but I didn't that day because they were being rowdy in the hallway. I took Robert to the office, and after hearing the story, the principal chewed him out. She then called Robert's mom, and she chewed him out on the phone. Here's the kicker. Robert knew that he was in serious trouble. He knew that what he was planning was wrong. He just didn't care. Not in a false bravado macho type was. He literally didn't care. I hate to predict a kid's future criminal endeavors, but that kid scares me. By the way, Robert was 8 years old at the time. I used to teach at an alternative high school, so a lot of my students were kids on probation, kids from areas with a lot of gang violence. Many of them had issues related to the fact that they were born drug addicted, that kind of thing. I had a student who I had worked hard with to build a good rapport. One Friday, he looked me in the eyes and told me, completely calmly, that I shouldn't come to work on Monday. He kept telling me that he didn't want me to be there Monday. When I finally pressed him for why I should not come to work Monday, he told me that he was going to blow this shit up. I said, "You know I need to report this, right?" He told me to do what I had to do. He was arrested right out of my classroom, and I had to be interviewed by the police. It was honestly really traumatic. I ended up calling out Monday, even though I knew nothing was going to happen, because my anxiety went through the roof. I called out a lot after that, and found a new job shortly after. But I still have a great deal of compassion for that student. I think about him often. I hope he's okay. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God, but according to mom it was not loose. He just sat at his desk and grabbed it and yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said he wasn't able to read anymore, so could he just put his head down. He was sent to the nurse and mom was horrified. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife, if that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive sexual things, moon students on the bus, etc. But the predatory behavior was the worst. He'd wait as students left the room, so he could be next to last, turn off the light and backhand the last kid in line, often his own cousin who was his most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends, or force his cousin to do so in case they were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, so I'm not sure what happened to him. I was a supervisor for a special program that involved about 20 students that were expelled from other schools. Most of them were known gang members. The program had a strict no bandana policy. One day kid 1, M16, stole kid 2's, M17, cigarettes while kid 2 was in an office session about his homework. We found out later that kid 1 thought it was hilarious and was laughing about it. Kid 2 goes for his smokes during break and can't find them. He proceeds to flip out and starts screaming about how he's going to fuck someone up. No one admitted it. We de-escalated the situation and later took him to the store to buy a new pack for him. A few days go by and kid 1 gets ratted out by another student who was in the same gang as kid 2. We didn't know any of this was going on at the time. One afternoon during a group session, We would have them sit in a circle during some lessons, instead of at desks. Out of nowhere these two boys jump up and yell "Yo kid 1" as they literally run at him and proceed to beat him up right in front of everyone until the staff broke it up. All three got expelled after that, and I have no idea what happened to them, although I can imagine some scenarios based on how committed they were to gang life. Edit. Us buying cigarettes for a minor is certainly a point of controversy as evidenced in the comments. A few people correctly pointed out that given the circumstances, it was the best decision at the time. It helped us calm him down, take him away from the tense environment, and offered us an opportunity to create a moment of trust building in adult figures, which we know he didn't have much of. The majority of those kids were daily smokers, weed and tobacco, so this was not a moment to try and be authoritative about smoking. Cigarettes were a coping mechanism more than anything. These kids had really shitty lives overall. Cigarettes are a kind of stress relief for them. No one joins a gang because they grew up in a privileged environment. A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter. Immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter right out of his hands, and said "Quit being an asshole." Then sat right back down for the lesson to continue. Edit. Thank you so much for the gold, kind stranger. If I knew where the big kid went on to after middle school, I'd share it with him. That kid is an absolute fucking badass. I always mention this one because it was literally my first day teaching ever, but a kid in my class carved a girl's name into his leg and bled everywhere. That same class, a month later, I had a kid steal my wallet and then later come give it back to me when I was alone in a hall after school. When he gave it back to me, he calmly told me I should be aware of what he could do to me since he was able to easily steal from me without me noticing. I actually never reported him for that, but soon after his parents pulled him out of our school because they thought we were too liberal and filling their godly son with bad ideas, so yeah.